To hell and back. It's a statement we've heard in all walks of life, but depending on your perspective, the actual journey one takes can change drastically. Some of those journeys take place on a field of battle, others on the fields of sports. But perhaps the most challenging trek when going from hell to heaven is the quest of one's mind. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Win, a show where we interview champions and trailblazers and ask questions to uncover and discover their championship traits for succeeding in sports, work, and life. Win is part of Grit, a pivotalmomentsmedia.com channel focused on breaking the stigma surrounding mental fitness in sports. Visit pivotalmomentsmedia.com for more episodes, content, and education on how we can tackle that challenge together. Our guest today, Brady Leavold, shared a dream that most young people that grow up in Canada all share, to play professional hockey. Brady was on the track to do just that before his life took a dramatic turn towards addiction, crime, homelessness, and jail. But at perhaps his lowest point, Brady experienced a pivotal moment. He began unabashedly sharing his story from hell and back with the masses with the mission of educating and inspiring others. Brady created and hosts Hockey to Hell and Back, a podcast that dives into mental health for hockey players, and is the founder of Puck Support, which has the mission of igniting change in mental health and substance misuse by setting the hockey world in motion, while also honoring those lost to addiction and suicide. He is a trailblazer in the world of mental fitness and mental health, and not just in hockey. And he has found peace and purpose through helping others. He has a message that's not just worth listening to, but it's essential for everyone to hear. Brady, it's so awesome to have you here. Thanks for being on the show.
Wow, Lee, thanks. You're choking me up over here, man.
I'm not trying to do that in the intro. No, I meant every word, buddy.
Thank you so much. It's like I told you earlier, it's a real honor to be here, and any chance I get to be on any platform and hopefully share my story in hopes of just getting through to one person. And that's what I do. And it doesn't always get easier. I'll tell you that. There's been lulls where sharing my story has gotten easier, but then there's days where, I'm sitting here looking, I just look down too. I have a photo album. I don't even know why it's here. Pictures of me when I was a kid, and I'll get into some of the stuff I went through. And I'm looking at this little boy, and, nobody knew what he was going through. And before you hop back in, I love the intro when you talk about perspective, right? Hell and back. And before I go any further into my story, I don't know where you want to go with this, but I just want to remind people that perspective is very key. And, some of the stuff that I'll share is probably going to be pretty heavy and hard to listen to. And through that, some people will reach out to me and say, I haven't gone through what you've gone through, and I just stop them right there and, go back to perspective. And I think we all go through trials and tribulations. And like you talked about in the intro, it's not really so much about what we've gone through or what we've done, but how do we come back from that? And that's right. A part of my story as well. So thank you for having me. I'm, like I said, privileged to be here.
Well, look, profound words to start right there. And I'll say that I absolutely agree. It's one of the reasons we made this show was because, adversity is adversity, and we shouldn't judge people based on the severity, but how you respond to it. Because I think, and I've said this, how you respond to adversity, that's really who you are. Stuff happens, right? And again, the severity of that stuff absolutely can change. Right. But the ability to come back, which you never do alone. That's the other key here that we'll get into today. Like, you're never alone in that process. It's so important. Actually, Brady, you set up the first question. One of the things I've always been curious about, we talked about that pivotal moment where you shifted.
Yeah.
Call it whatever you want, divine influence. No one has ever be able to accurately explain what snaps, and I don't think anybody ever will. But I wanted you to just walk us through that pivotal moment where it clicked in your head of, you know what, I'm going this direction. I mean, you completely changed the trajectory of your life, right? I'm interested just in your thoughts of how you think that happened, why it happened, what was that pivotal moment, and how did it get us really to this conversation?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick with this, but that's a really great question. And it's interesting you bring it up because I was talking about it. Like, I'm aware of it. I know when it was. I still can't explain it, and I'll get into that. And I haven't really shared too much about this. And, I hadn't really thought in depth about this until just this past weekend. I was down at the Bob Probert ride and just kind of took all that in. And I had this moment where things just became even more clear to me. And, to that pivotal moment, though, there was a lot of struggle leading up to that point. 10 plus years of addiction. And like you touched on in the intro, and, that wasn't for lack of me trying. I mean, I went to several rehabs and detoxes and different psych wards and counselors, and, exhausted every resource, either out of pocket or from the government. Like I tried everything until finally it was like, you know what, I just can't, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to beat this. I'd get a little bit time clean here and there until finally things got worse. Right.
Right.
And took me to places that I never thought that I would get to. And by the time, I'd spent 3 years in jail, and spending in 3 years in a place like that, it completely changes you, right? Like, I don't care who you are, when you spend 3 years in there, if you don't start to kind of conform to that kind of mentality in there, your time in there is going to be hell. And that's just the way that it is. And, being kind of used to being in a group of guys as a hockey player, I kind of was able to fit in, and that kind of became the new normal for me. And, everything was just wrapped around my addiction. So, there wasn't like the thought process for me wasn't like, hey, how can I get out of this? I was actually leaving one night I was freshly out of jail, and like, I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. Like I was thinking, I can't even get a job. I have a criminal record. There's no way I can get back into hockey or do anything. Like my life is over. And, I had no money. And, when you live that life for that long, you start to do things that, you would never do. And, I set out to go do something that was against the law. And, I had to walk this distance, and I was just walking, and it was kind of cold. It was like mid-February or early February, I would say, mid to early February of 2020. And I was up in Muskoka, Ontario, which is a beautiful place. It's where I am now, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I decided I was going to go for a walk and do whatever. And I'll share more about it when I'm writing my book, but there's so much more that goes into it. But I just say I was going to do something that wasn't great. And I walked, and I was walking for about 15 minutes, and I was underdressed because I barely had any clothes or anything. Like I had nothing, right? And I had this Gong Show hockey hoodie on. It was so thin, I'll never forget. It was the only hoodie I had. And I was walking, and, all of a sudden, and this was the question that I was asking myself this weekend was like, was it me talking to myself, or was it a voice that I heard coming from somewhere else? It was this beautiful, crisp night, no lights, nothing but stars up in Muskoka. And all of a sudden there was this voice, and it was like, what the hell are you doing right now? Like, who are you, and like, you're really going to go do that right now? Like, because I was, a few months or weeks clean at the time, sporadically. So my mind wasn't so thrust into that addiction, and I was starting to think a little bit clearly, I guess. And there was this voice that was like, just turn around and go home, and just go home, and your life will become better than it's ever been imaginable. And I just trusted that. And I went back, and I'll never forget, I walked into the house, and the girl I was seeing at the time was like, what happened? Like, because she was begging me not to go. And it was like this, and came back, and I just broke down. I started crying. And the next day, I woke up, and I had the idea to start my podcast. And It was just out of the blue, like out of the snap blue. I had no equipment. I didn't have a computer. I didn't have anything. I didn't have a working phone. I think I only had like Wi-Fi phone at the time. I just made this snap decision, and I borrowed a computer, and I sat in a car, my girlfriend at the time's mom's car, and recorded this first episode, and just started sharing my story, and decided to get brutally honest about some of the stuff that had happened to me. And by doing that, I was able to let go of that, and then also find just a whole new path by creating Puck Support through the stories that I had heard that were so similar to mine. And in so many cases, they just didn't end in the same way mine is. I'm here to tell my story. So many people aren't.
That's unbelievable. And I'll tell you what, Brady, I think about this stuff a lot, human suffering. And again, suffering is that thing you have to have perspective on, because suffering is suffering, whether it's legitimate in someone else's mind or not. And really, with the human mind, in my experience, and this goes back to, almost ancient teachings, your suffering will get you to one of two places. All right. One is unfortunately in the grave, right? The other one is you realize the suffering is caused by a prison of your own mind. And when those walls break, I think that's what happened to you, the true you emerged out of nowhere. Now, again, I cannot, I said this before, I can't explain what power makes that happen. But you get to a point where that voice was the real you, and the other voices were preconditioned thinking and lots of different things. Again, I'm not you, I'm just saying. And I think that your suffering got to a point where you snapped the walls down and the real you emerged. And I think that's something that all of us have to do. I mean, your consciousness, being conscious of your consciousness, that you are not the voices in your head.
Yeah.
You are not them, right? They're a construct created from your experiences, right? And when you let go of that, a real you, which in my understanding, when you actually get there, it's not physically a voice. It's just you're able to be, right? And you've been in that place for since that moment. It sounds like, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, what? Yeah, go ahead.
I wish I had the capacity to explain it better, but
It's tough.
I don't even, but at the same time, it happened. And I'll tell you, that was over 2 years ago. And my life today is not perfect, but I'm not striving for perfection like I did as an athlete. I mean, what is perfection anyways? I mean, I'm really just enjoying each and every single day because I know how lucky I am to be alive. We all are, regardless of what we've gone through, just to be here and have this gift of life and to be the main character in your own story. And you can really do, whatever you want to do. If you really want to do it, you can do it. And, I've proved that to myself in these past 2 years. And, I just, so many things that I just never thought possible with all the stuff that I'd gone through and just where I was at. And I was so hopeless. And I wanted to die, countless suicide attempts, so many overdoses. I didn't care because I was just felt trapped. And here I am, sitting here with, I can't even believe some days that I was able to kick the addiction because it was that bad. Right. And it just, I was able to find a new purpose and I was able to find my true self like you talked about. And I think that's something that I always identified as this hockey player. And of course I played hockey, but that's not really an identity. Outside of hockey there's a whole other life, and I had no idea who this little 5-year-old boy in these pictures was, because all I knew was hockey. And the reason why I played so much hockey, I'll just jump into it just to share with people a little bit about why maybe I went down the addiction path, was because when I was 5, I was sexually abused. And that was a very obviously traumatic experience. But what it did, it pushed me into hockey because hockey was my safe space. It was like, and I'm not just talking about on the ice, like I'm talking about in my driveway, playing mini sticks. I was sleeping with my stick. It didn't matter. Always stick handling, because when I was doing that, I didn't have to think about that. Also, at the same time, my mom had left. My dad is a single dad. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And a lot of stuff that I, nobody knew. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody until, not too long ago, just a few years ago, 25 plus years, I held on to that secret, trying to will myself through it. And, it cost me a lot of opportunities through junior hockey, quitting teams and walking away. Like I got rookie of the year, the Swift Current Broncos, and then quit the team the next year, like a few games into the season, because I was suicidal. I honestly couldn't handle it. And I just packed up and left. And like Dean Chanouth, I'm out of here, man. And the year before, I even took a mental health leave of absence. But back then, 2004, people weren't really talking about this stuff. And, I didn't want to talk about it. I come back to the dressing room after that little leave of absence as a 17-year-old, and all the guys on the team are calling me baby, go home, baby, this and that. I'm getting hazed, bleached in the shower and mopped and all this stuff and getting picked on. And now hockey isn't that safe space, right? Like, and now I'm questioning, like, why the hell am I even playing hockey? I'm not loving it that much. I just loved it because the way it made me feel. And then enter alcohol, and then, a little bit later on drugs, because I was a hockey player, and my understanding of hockey players, which I now know is to be false, but as a kid was, these guys just don't do drugs. And really we shouldn't. But I was just like, no, like if you do drugs, like you can't play hockey. And that was the idea I had in my head for so long, until finally I broke at 18, and still continued to will my way through the Western League a little bit but everyone knew that I was like the black sheep, like the scouts, the coaches, guys on the team, on the other teams were pretending to, do drugs, like on their benches, like, hey, Leavold, this and that. And like, and it didn't, it affected me, but at the same time, nobody ever really pulled me aside and said, hey, like, what's really going on here? I mean, there was a couple guys, Max Offenberger, who's awesome. He came in and did some stuff with us. But, at the same time at 17, 18, I was like, you think I'm going to tell this guy, this doctor, and then he's going to tell the coaches, and then I'm going to be pulled off the team, and then my life is over. Like, that was the way I was thinking. And I think it's so wrong. And that's why I appreciate what you guys are doing, is trying to make people understand, coaches, parents, and the athlete, that this is something we need to pay attention to, because, we've lost way too many, and so many continue to struggle. And this isn't a hockey problem. This is just what happens in life. And the hockey community is no exception. Just like everywhere else, there is no exceptions. This affects people everywhere of all ages and sex orientations and races. And it doesn't matter your job, your family, best upbringing, worst upbringing. I've seen it all. So it's time that we start to really, I hate to use the word normalize, guys, but because what the hell is normal anyways, but you guys understand what I mean by normalize this stuff. So anyways, I'll shut up and let you hop in. But like I said, I get talking and I'm just very passionate about this stuff. And I spend a lot of time on the phone with people who are struggling, and also family members, some of them behind me in these pictures, who have lost loved ones who, to overdose and suicide, and they're just left with questions and so much pain. And there's just so much that needs to be done in this space. And I just appreciate anyone that's trying to do anything. And I'm looking to work and partner with anybody, organization that's like-minded, because there's not one solution or one guy or one lady or one group or whatever that's going to take all this on and tackle it. So I really believe the power of community. That's what I've seen in my own healing and the healing of others. You want to talk about real healing and where it starts? It's the power of community. That's what I believe.
Brady, it's you have an amazing story, and you're super brave. I'll speak for the group. I'm glad you didn't take your own life, and now that you're sharing the story, I seen it, firsthand, in the military. A young Army officer who was completely put together, and something broke loose in him, and while in Afghanistan, he took his own life. And and I never. It's tough to wrap your head around all those things, because you see somebody that's, completely put together, things happen. Then you see people that aren't put together, things happen. And it's just such a struggle. And I also liked what you said about, everybody doesn't understand like what's going on in that individual person. And I think that's so important. I think a lot of times in the military, we look at, people in different military career fields, and we say, yeah, that person should have PTSD because they do this, but this person shouldn't. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's just so archaic of a thought process. And then, you being a hockey player, I look at it from, my time working with teams. Sometimes it is that way. When you do get labeled, hey, he's this or he's that, like, people just move on from you because they go on in this thing because they don't want to assist at your development. Lee and I have this talk all the time. I think, some of the, two most important positions of a team are, head coach, obviously, but I also think player development, the person that runs player development, because each of those players are different human beings, and they have to figure out who those are. Brady, obviously you had a love for the game. You found it as a safe space, then it wasn't a safe space. But there was a long period of time when you were away from that game, and then you resparked your passion for that. And it's taking you back to where you are now. Why don't you just, go through that with us?
Yeah. I'm starting to cry again. I cry a lot because, it's really just an amazing story. Something that I still just so grateful to the Swift Current Broncos. They sent me a pair of skates. I had nothing, right? And I was a bit of a problem in Swift Current too for like 4 years, and quitting the team and going back multiple times. And they were just super kind. They knew that I was out of jail, and they sent me like a custom pair with like extended white tongues like that I used to have, and the whole things. And they sent me in there, like, get back on the ice. And, I didn't really know what that looked like, but fortunately I was in Muskoka, like I said, at the time, in the middle of nowhere, living essentially on a lake. I mean, my girlfriend's parents' property was up from the lake, and her grandparents was right on the lake. And it was maybe a couple of weeks after I started my podcast, I ended up skating down the driveway right onto the lake. It was a scene out of Mystery Alaska. Like growing up in BC, I never had that opportunity to really skate on lakes, little frozen ponds. Like once in my life, it was cold enough. Now it seems it's a little bit colder out there, but I'll tell you, it was, and I didn't have a stick. I didn't have anything. And I don't even think I tied my skates up. I have a video of it too. And I just skated around for like 5 minutes on this lake. And I knew, I was like, I have to do something with hockey. Like, I don't know what that looks like, but this has to be, it can't just be about talking about my story. Like, I personally need this for me because I know how good this makes me feel. And it took me a long time. Like, I resented the game of hockey for a long time. I couldn't watch it because, my former line mates or teammates or guys that I was like, oh, I scored more points than that guy. I beat that guy up and now he's fighting heavyweights. It's like this and that and every excuse until finally, I think when I had that realization and really that moment on the ice that day kind of helped me solidify that, where I could just really appreciate what it takes to make it to the NHL and the sacrifices and the commitment that those guys that maybe at one time, maybe I was better, maybe I wasn't, maybe it doesn't matter, but I was able to look at it differently and just have the utmost respect for their journeys. Right. And then also on the other side of that was being able to understand that, hey, maybe being a hockey player at that capacity wasn't what I was meant to do. And this is actually what I was supposed to be doing. And all this stuff that I've gone through, as hard as it's been, and the hell and oh man, it was awful. But I'll tell you, I say this to people all the time. I played on a line with Jamie Benn in Kelowna. I was 2 years older, but I had more points than him. I'm not comparing myself to Jamie. He was always better than me. I'm not even disputing that. But I played on a line with Jamie Benn. And he's at the tail end of his third contract on a $76 million contract, whatever it is. He made over $100 million playing hockey. I wouldn't trade my life for his, not now. He's won an Olympic gold. He's won world junior gold. He's accomplished so much. Captain of the Dallas Stars, unbelievable NHL career. I wouldn't trade it, because if you put me in that position, I probably would have killed myself through all that money. And I feel that at my retirement, whenever that would be 36, 37, I'd be struggling going, who the hell am I? And today I know who I am. And I'm not saying that's the case for Jamie or for any other guys. I'm just speaking on, I know how I would have felt after having to try to find myself, because I did it right after my hockey career was taken, because I got prescribed painkillers and went on the addiction and all that. I still didn't know who I was. So what makes you think that it would have been any different if I was 34, 35 and played the game forever? You see a lot of people when they leave their sport, especially hockey players, it's all I really know, really have a hard time. Some guys have no issues, or on the surface, it looks like they have no issues, let's say. In many cases, maybe they don't, but so many, it seems that they're just going through life after hockey, golfing, just kind of wasting their years away. And I'm just so grateful to be in the position that I'm in. I wouldn't change it for the world.
And Brady, the game doesn't allow them to plan their life next, because, as soon as they do, the GM hears them, oh, you want to open a restaurant when you're out? Like, he's not dedicated to the game, right? He's losing focus. And that should be, hopefully I'm going to be back in the pro game again. I'm going to change that.
Yeah.
Because we should do that.
Yeah.
We should say, let's plan your life after. It doesn't mean that you're not dedicated to what you're doing.
Well, how about this, JB? There's so much stats out there, so many stats that show when you work on the person, not just the player, the results 100%. Are better. I mean, there's plenty of information that shares that, but there's this kind of old school stigma, old boys club attitude of know your cattle.
Yeah.
And
now, Willie Mitchell would sit in the locker room, and him and I would talk, and he's like, hey, when I retire, I'm going to have a restaurant up in Vancouver, the whole thing. But he already won 2 Stanley Cups, and he was the captain of our team now. He could kind of say that. But the young guys are all like, man, I can't say a damn word.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different story, but we should promote that, because it should be, Lee's on this other great podcast, Life After the Military. These military guys get out, and then they're like, now
same
what?
Issue. Yeah.
Now what do I do? Oh, I guess I'll go back to contracting and carry a gun in civilian clothes now, instead of purposing their life to something they want.
Well, again, loss of purpose, loss of identity,
purpose, and
loss of community.
Brady, you said that. You said, I had to find a purpose because, especially in men,
Yeah.
if a man loses his purpose, done, forget it.
Yeah.
Then you're lost at sea. Go ahead, Lee.
Look, I was just going to say the commonalities are there amongst depression, suicidal tendencies, loss of purpose, loss of identity, loss of community. Our species is not meant to operate without those things. Whether you're introvert, extrovert, or whatever, there is no scenario where you succeed in this life by yourself. And if you feel alone and that you're not worth anybody, I'm telling you, Brady will tell you, JB will tell you, you are worth somebody, all of it, everyone. All right. You just need to find that community that's there. Brady, I love that they sent you those skates. I think that says a lot about that organization, but that those are people helping people. That had to have inspired you as well with what you're doing with puck support. Look, one other thing I want to say, Brady, before it skips out of my mind. You brought up Jamie Benn. I saw this morning. I saw that picture of you and Stamkos, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I looked at that, I said, wow, there's two trailblazers, there's two heroes, right? And I'm sure that at times it's hard to look at that picture. I'm sure that there's people look at that picture and go, that's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion captain and another guy. And I want to echo what you just said. You've both accomplished amazing things. And you're both amazing people at two completely different points of your life in that photo, right? So it just goes to show you that, look, a lot of people idolize athletes. I don't want to tell people who or who not to idolize, but my attitude is that, I think about our priorities, and this has nothing to do with Steven Stamkos, God bless him. But my attitude is, I looked at you and I had the same feeling for you. And that at probably what was one of your lowest points, if from what I've read.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we talked about perspective at the start of the episode, man, because like that's what I see when I look at that. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to comment on that because that struck me this morning.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that that picture. I mean, I look at it now and like where I'm at now, I can comfortably look at that picture. And actually, I didn't see that picture. That picture wasn't really like floating around anywhere until a certain newspaper article came out and they pulled it out of the woodwork somehow from some media company. Who knows where it was?
Right.
But I've seen a couple other ones, and like there's some videos on YouTube because it was like right when he was drafted first overall, and I was playing on his line in development camp, and I was using the night before because I didn't train all summer because I was just riddled with anxiety and stress and pressures, and I had a bunch of other stuff going on in my personal life too, and all the other stuff, the trauma, all that. And what you don't see in that picture, the other part of our line that night was a guy by the name of Mitch Fadden, who was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning and was my roommate in Norfolk. And he was partying with me the night before, right? And there's a Sportsnet article that I share this story a little bit, but I left his name out because I hadn't talked to him in a few years. And then when the story came out, I was looking for him because I really wanted to, hopefully he was like doing good, and maybe we could have a chuckle about it, and maybe wants to come on my podcast. And a few days later, I found out that he passed away of an overdose, right? In 2017. This guy was like a 2-time WHL All-Star, just an incredible hockey player, a great guy, but battled some of the same demons that I did. And when I found that out, that was the second player that I had heard of dying of fentanyl overdose at the time, which was I'll just say the substance that I used and abused for many years. That's why I'm very lucky to be here myself, right? The previous one was a guy by the name of Matthew Lazinski he played for the Sioux Greyhounds, and his story, if you want to know more about it, I talk a lot about it on my podcast, but those are the first two stories that really inspired puck support, because now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, there's two guys, and one guy that was my brother, a guy that I loved deeply and spent a lot of time with. We were, we lived together for a few months. We did everything together. Right. And that, I hadn't talked to him since I talked to him. I looked at my messages. I talked to him 2 weeks before he passed away. Right. Back in 2017 was the last time I talked to him, 2.5, 3 weeks, something like that. And I knew that, if there was me, but I'm here to tell my story, but here's Matthew, here's Mitch. I said, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And I dug in, and what I started to uncover was heart wrenching. I dug into overdoses and hockey players specifically that had gone through addiction and mental health challenges and died of suicide or overdose. And And currently I know of 76 hockey players that fall into that category. And I know of about 11 just in 2021 alone, hockey players ranging from the youngest at 16 all the way up to Jimmy Hayes in the NHL. 11 hockey players died of overdose. Just many of them you never hear about because they didn't play professional hockey, or they didn't make it as far to the NHL. And it's time to just, again, I don't blame hockey. I just look to hockey as the vehicle to try to ignite this conversation and ignite this change and help people talk about these things and educate themselves about it, because it's not always just about the person who's in crisis or doing the drugs. It's about those people who are around them, right. and whether it be parents or coaches, whoever, the teammates, putting themselves in the best position possible to support that person before it turns into a crisis, right? And being that safe person to talk to, or knowing that there's that trust, because that's something that I never had, and so many of us didn't. And I say it all the time, but every morning I wake up, I know how lucky I am to be here. I have reminders on my phone 5 times a day. One just came up, it'll say, stop, be grateful, you are alive. I don't ever let myself forget that. And and to think there's so many days where I just didn't want to be here, and to have the understanding of just just how precious life really is and what a gift it really is. It just puts things into a whole different perspective, and just a different way of thinking, different way I live my life. And it's been a big part of my recovery journey, and it's led me to kind of get to where I am today.
I have to say this too at this point in the episode, because there is a stigma surrounding all of this stuff. And the way I explain that to people is, we talk about numbers a lot, talk about how many soldiers were killed on active duty, or people killed in the game, or people killed in general from disease. We don't ever talk about mental health and suicide rates. You know why? Because they're staggering, and they're on the rise. Staggering numbers. If we put those numbers into the news like we do these other numbers, the conversation would change drastically. The military alone, everybody knows the 22 a day number. If my last check, that number's doubled since COVID.
Yeah,
doubled. It trumps soldiers killed in active duty.
Yeah.
It just shows you who's running what in our society, which is, I just looked at a stat here. Just in the U.S., fentanyl deaths in the U.S. last year, 107,000. Are you kidding me?
107,000
fentanyl deaths from the CDC. So it's probably more. It's probably staggering. More. They're probably hiding some of that. But right. Same thing. We've talked about. You retire from the military. You go and you say something. Next thing you know, I had piles and piles and piles of pills. Take these pills, you'll feel better. And fortunately, Brady, I got myself to throw them away, and try to, like we struggle with it daily, but we try to find healthy ways to struggle with it, because that's the point. And you're exactly right. If people saw really what it takes and what's happening in society with that, then people would stop and say, stop it. Stop producing opioids. Stop.
That's the stigma.
Yeah. I don't like to get into the whole, the situation that's been going on for the last 2 years. I don't want to get your thing bleeped out by Spotify. You can't say certain words, or you're going to have a little notice underneath your podcast like I do in some of mine. But I mean, at the end of the day, we're sitting here and we're talking about all this stuff that's going on, and people, have lost their lives because of this sickness that's going around. But what about the other people that died because their gyms were closed, and they, their meetings were taken away, and they lost
restaurants,
jobs,
everything,
and their businesses, and their everything else? That is where the real problem lies. And I don't know what the solution is, but I just hope that after all this, that I don't even want to say people wake up, but in a sense, people need to wake up, because, I'm guilty of it too. I always look to the powers that be to come and fix everything. Right. And that's why I keep talking about, the strength of community and people helping people.
Right.
We talked about
that's power.
That is real power. Right. And because those people at the top, they do whatever they need to do for themselves and their families and everything else. And, it's time for us to just, as people, I'm not saying go on the offensive against them. No, just let's just take care of each other.
Let's have a conversation. We talked about this the other day, look, there is no snap solution. The solution is to have a conversation, to not point at someone who's down and not laugh, but to say, he screwed his life up. It's have some compassion that person's in a low space. I'm not saying you got to get out of your car and do something, but think, this is where it starts. Brady, I want to bring this in the next question because, look, one person's too many. We're talking millions, really, when you think about it. One of the aspects of puck support that I actually think is amazing, you constantly share, show, and remember athletes that we've lost too soon due to addiction, suicide, and other reasons. If you're watching this podcast, you can literally see these people on the wall behind Brady right now. In all of his marketing materials, which I have, I shouldn't call this marketing. In all of his materials, they're listed. I have a hat on. Inside the hat is a name. You're constantly fighting to keep these people's memory alive. And I also know you're heavily involved with their families in some cases. I want to ask this question. Why is it so important that we keep the memory of these young people alive?
Because they have a story and they were loved and they were good people. And, by keeping their memory alive, it's obviously important for the families and for the individuals who knew them. In many cases, I didn't know all of them, but I now know their families. And the families are now talking to each other too, right? And finding strength in supporting one another, and also finding strength to be able to share their son or their daughter's story, where in a lot of times they were feeling like they couldn't because of the stigma, because of being judged. So often you see in obituaries, especially like a young person's like passed away suddenly. And it's like, there's a reason why people put passed away suddenly in so many cases. It's because they're fearful of how that person's going to be remembered, or how their family will be judged if they say passed away due to a drug overdose or a suicide, or however they could word it. And it's important to keep their memory alive too, to show people, to help educate people, and to really help people open their eyes to saying, hey, look, like, this isn't just some buzzword that's going around where mental health is, we got to talk about it. Like, no, there's people who are struggling and have lost their life because of it. And when I talk about mental health, addiction for me falls under that category, because I've never met one drug addict in my life. And I've met thousands and thousands. You have no idea. I was homeless on Hastings in Vancouver. There's like 5,000 of them down there, all living in tents. I've never met one that didn't have an underlying mental health issue, or a mental illness, like an actual multiple diagnoses in most cases, where they are not getting the right forms of treatment, or they're being medicated, and oftentimes they're turning to drugs just to make themselves feel better. And that is exactly what I was doing. And people have to understand that there's reasons why people are in these situations, and it just goes back to creating that conversation. And there's so many of the families that I've talked to, and I share this, and it's hard for them. And it's been a common story, is that they wish that they would have been able to speak out about it more within their families, within their groups, or wish that they would have done more to put themselves in a position. Because in many cases, they were like, well, they're like, we saw it happen around us, but we never thought this would happen to our family. And then all of a sudden they're left with this big hole in their heart. And, that's really difficult, but that's also a real powerful statement for people listening. This can happen to anyone or any family. And I think, we pray for the best. But if you can point me in the direction of somebody that doesn't know at least one person who's battling or has battled mental health or addiction, send them over. Because I haven't met one at least 18 plus, like an adult here in Canada, that can tell me they don't have a friend, a brother, a sister, a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever, neighbor, whatever it is, coworker. It's everywhere. Right. So let's talk about this stuff.
Well, and what sorry, Lee, but what I like is that, Brady, is that, like, you can have this issue, you can get over it, you can become a productive human. I think sometimes it's like, oh, well, that person did that, and so he can't come back. And that's just, it's just the, archaic, just makes my head hurt, just the archaic way of thinking of people. And so I'm going to ask you this, Brady. My son's a coach. He played college hockey. He's 31. He's a coach in New York, trying to find his way to the, next level of coaching. And, I feel like he gets it as a human being, but there's a lot of coaches that don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of educators, there's a lot of leaders. And so your advice to them for the mental health in hockey, for the, trying to, get people help. And, they take all these coaching programs. Most of them are, BS anyway, because they don't allow the person to, observe and look and find help for these people. Help these young coaches out. What do you tell them?
Wow. Open your hearts and open your ears, right? Like it's, and open your eyes, because you don't have to look too far in any given dressing room. Let's just talk about hockey for a second, to find somebody in there, probably multiple players on any given day that, are either dealing with something either from a past traumatic event, or something that happened in that day. Maybe there's problems at home, and, that's sometimes things snowball, right? And when you say these leaders, right? People who with closed eyes and closed hearts are not leaders to me. So, but unfortunately that in some cases, they're the ones making the decisions. And I think, again, hockey is, to me, and I may be biased, maybe we all are here, the most beautiful, the coolest game on earth. Like it is, there's so much going on out there, but it's a game. Like it's a game at the end of the day. And I'm not talking about the NHL. That's a huge business. That's professional. That's on a different level. But even there, they need to do more about the individual person. There's no doubt. But let's talk younger hockey coaches, junior college, minor hockey. I mean, how many of your players are going to go on and play in the NHL or play pro hockey? Like very little, very small percentage. But how many of them are going to have to go on and find their way in this life after hockey?
Yeah, they're going to be a professional at something. Exactly.
Every single
That's
one.
right.
Right. So I always say, like on my shirt, like mental health over hockey. Like that's what I say. Like, let's take care of people before like worrying about what they're doing on the ice. And then let's see how their performance is on the ice, alluding to what Lee said earlier. I mean, you want the best out of your players or your employees, however you want to look at it. Do the best for them, right?
Right. The people, not the player, the people.
That's right.
And you're making me think. We've got about 9 minutes left, Brady. Something that came out of this conversation, I just kind of realized. You think about the death toll, or even just the affected toll of mental health, mental illness, mental fitness, however you want to combine that. And then you look at something like cancer, right? You don't ignore cancer when you have it. If you do, you die. Right? You don't ignore it. You go right to the doctor, and then everyone surrounds you. I'm thinking of, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, I'm thinking of Oscar Lindblom right now on the Flyers, and how the organization and his teammates, everyone surrounded him and supported him, and he recovered and he came back. It was a wonderful story. I take nothing away from that. Why do we not treat mental illness with the same gravity and the same grace?
Because cancer is socially acceptable.
But it's a stigma. Right? And that's where I'm going.
And then it's like, oh, you got something with your mind?
Yeah, but that's the stigma.
That's why we never said anything.
Right. This is the stigma we have to break.
Exactly.
All right. And this is going to lead me into the final question, Brady. But I like to give perspectives like that because it's eye-opening. Like, man, we really do. We treat cancer totally different. And the death toll is probably comparable. All right. And again, I'm not even talking about suicide survivors right now. Like it's comparable. We don't have the grace to do this. And that is why, and I am not insulting anyone. I'm not meaning to with this. That is why we get the statements of, I never thought my kid would do this, because we are so scared and understand it's no one's fault. It's societal to bring it up because we don't want to face that. Again, perspective. I'm not in any way talking to parents in a negative format here. I just wanted to say that. But Brady, this is my last question. It's one of the things about you that is inspiring. I look up to you for this, but your bravery when it comes to sharing your story is unbelievable to me. And we've seen it throughout this episode. We live in a time, social media is a human highlight reel. We only see the good stuff. You have been really nothing short of fearless in your approach and sharing your story. And there's no way that's been easy at times for you. I have to ask this. I don't even know if you can answer it. Where do you find the courage to do that? Why is it so important to do that? Because you are in the minority of people doing that right now. And I think that's real strength. I think from a social media standpoint, you're real. Like that's what we need to see, the good, the bad, everything in between. I go on your feed one day, it's you just enjoying skating. And the next day it's reuniting with your father. I mean, it's incredible, raw human stuff. Where do you find the courage to do that?
Yeah, well, I think I just took a chance on that first episode of my podcast, and I was very, very lucky that people were so receptive and so kind and so supportive right from day one. People that I didn't know, people that I knew, people started to reach out and support me, and it just sort of lifted me up. And I kind of, there's been hate along the way and people that do this, and sometimes I have fun with it, mostly just to address it as an education point, because I don't really let it bother me. Social media for me, I probably wouldn't have it if I wasn't doing what I'm doing, but nowadays it's like you need it if you want to build something. But there is a lot of good that comes out of social media, certainly in my life and other people's lives. But I was also in a position where, like, when I was sent to jail, it was like front page news in the Vancouver newspaper, right? And it was like somebody else like telling this story of me, and like there's no details of it. It's just like former pro hockey player did all this horrible stuff, and now he's in jail. And it was like, well, is that going to be the last thing like that's going to be written about me, or am I going to rewrite this and tell the truth, like whatever that is? And there's a lot of things that I've done that I'm ashamed of, but I take it all as a life experience. A lot of it I've shared, some of it I haven't. Again, I'm writing a book. There's just not always enough time or the space to go into these details. But like my back was kind of up against the wall, and I was never addiction took me down. I was scared of addiction. I was scared of the trauma. I was scared of being judged about what happened, being sexually abused by like an older guy, like growing up, like being judged like that. Like it was really hard. Right. But I just found this strength. It was like, you know what, like there's nowhere else I can go but up from here. Like I've hit the bottom of the bottom, certainly here in Canada. Like I was homeless on Hastings for like almost a year. Like there's nothing worse than that in Canada when it comes to that and all these places. And I didn't do it for me. It was never, ever about, okay, what can I get out of this? It was never about that. I just had this overwhelming sense that I was called to share my story. Like I'm still alive and here I am. And I think, I didn't have a choice but to start sharing my story. But I owe a lot to the people who have supported me. Like there's no doubt about it. All these people, coming out of nowhere, essentially on social media and sending me messages, and in a lot of cases, like so many, like probably like 1,000+ messages in the last 2 years, where people honestly like message me and share, and then they'll like go into like great detail about their life. And at the end, they're like, I have no idea why I just told you that. I've never told anybody. And then, create a conversation. And then I'll get a message like a week later. Hey, I was able to tell my husband, or I was able to tell my wife, or I was able to tell, my mom or my dad. And in one case, a 14-year-old girl was abused and told me, and she's like, I haven't told anybody. I was able to talk to her to the point where we were able to get her to tell her parents, where they were able to take it to the police and deal with it and all this stuff. And like those are the instances where it's like, this isn't about me. Like, forget about what people are thinking about me or judging me, or I don't care. Let's just tell it how it is. And I can only share my experience and my story, because that's all I know. That's all anyone knows, is their own story and their own experience. And that's all I can do. And maybe it's not for everybody, but I'll tell you, it's had a significant impact in my life by sharing my story, just by the relationships and the friendships that are created. Like-minded people, like yourselves, like this, and it's just it's been a gift to be able to have this voice. And, you know, like you said, some days it's not easy to do. Certainly depending on the setting, if it's like an in-person thing and I'm getting really into it, depending like the scenario, it can be really hard, but it's also important because I'm still working through stuff. We talked about this earlier. Some days are still hard. We just find a better way to deal with it. So this has been what's worked for me. And again, I don't encourage everybody to just start blasting their whole life all over social media. I just felt like I really didn't have much more of a choice. And then to do that. And again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who supported me, because without your love and support, and like, if I would have tried 2.5 years ago with that podcast and would have flopped or whatever, and people would have been like, get out of here, like, probably not alive right now. So I owe so much to every single person that supported me in any way in the last couple of years. Without them, I'm not able to share my story.
Amazing.
It is, Brady. And I'll tell you, I have found this through interviewing military, through interviewing people in your situation. And I look up to you. I mean that. I look up to you because the path to peace typically lies in helping other people that have been in similar situations.
Yeah.
I've seen that military, I've seen it in your position, and it's selfless. And we talked about leadership before. You are a leader, and it's amazing. I hope you see yourself that way, but even if you don't, you are a servant leader. And Brady are the type of people like Brady are the type of people we need to look to right now, not the superstar. And I'm not trying to insult superstars, but that, you know, you are a leader. You are a trailblazer. We say it in the title of the show, and I mean that. And I'm not just saying that to build you up, man. I'm saying it for the audience to understand. We got to go through this together, like arm in arm, and understand these situations. And I got to close it out. I just got to tell you, man, like your story is insane in a good way, and you inspire me. You know, the work you do is fearless. I'm going to say that again. To come on here to tell the story the way you tell it, to share it with the hope of you said inspiring one person, which you have done already. You know, that's the type of work we need to do more as a society. You were unbelievably fantastic. I would say this again, man. We've done a lot of episodes. This is probably one of the most important ones we've ever done.
Thank you.
There are many superstars, Lee. There's only one Brady. Brady, you're I'm telling you, you're awesome. You're leading the way. You could have took the easy route out. You didn't. You took the hard route. You're coming back and you're bringing others with you. So
that's what it's all about. It's never been, like I said, about me. It's going back to those that we've lost. I just want to show quickly, like I have a name in my hat. In this particular case, it's Andrew Carroll. So that's something we do. I just give me 1 minute, Lee, if we have it.
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to explain something with what Puck Support really is. It was supposed to only be like a charitable organization to help support hockey players, coaches, families, the hockey community relating to mental health and addiction issues, and also helping communities and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it was 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. And I was fresh into my podcast and I had no idea what to do. I'm calling lawyers and they're like, yeah, $10,000. I'm like, I only have $10. Click, you know? And I didn't really know what to do. And, but I wanted to do something. And then, you know, fast forward a few months, Doug Gilmour, hockey legend, Doug Gilmour, his older brother, it was his 70th birthday. And it's so cool because I owe Dave Gilmour, and he was a hockey legend in his own right, played in the WHA, lit up the OHL. I think it might've been the OHA because he's not to date him, but he's in his 70s. It was his 70th birthday, and he's a bit of a health freak, a retired prison guard too, which was really cool. The whole Gilmour family outside of Doug is prison guards, and he was going to ride his bike 50K and run 20K. And he was going to raise money for Puck Support. Really small fundraiser just in Kingston. Raised about like $2,700, and he sent it to me. He's like, you know, you do whatever you want with Puck Support. And I was like, it was amazing, right? Like it was incredible. He's like, do whatever you want. I was like, well, it's not enough to do the charity stuff, but maybe I'll get like a video made. It was like this, I was going to get this video. I'm like, but one video, then what? Right. So I ended up, buying a heat press and buying all this stuff to make clothing, and like taught myself how to like press shirts and build a website and do everything. And so, now we're working on partnering with some hockey stores here in Canada to take it to the next level. They want to start carrying it in stores and stuff like that. But again, a big part of it is in every piece, like we talked about earlier, like even in the shirt, there's a name. Isaac Lee, he passed away of an overdose this past December. His mom Marla is a good friend of mine now, and his family. But it's a way that, and I'm the one putting the names in all the stuff. And every time I do that, I can just see, Brady Leavold going in there. And then I stop to think, it's like, well, if I died, like would all these players be talked about right now? And that's why it's so important to keep their memory alive too, is just, I can't tell you how passionate I am about it. Oftentimes I break down and I'm crying when I'm doing it. When I see certain, especially like my old coach from my first year pro, who I was in rehab with, he passed away of an intentional overdose. Mitch Fadden, Kevin Kerbison, who I actually flew out to Ontario and tried to help him because he was homeless, and it didn't work out because you got to want to help yourself. And he ended up going home, and I got a call on Boxing Day. He died. He was my former teammate, friend. We played men's league together. We grew up together. Played junior B at 15 together. We played in the BC Hockey League, full ride scholarship opportunities, the whole nines. And I get a call on Boxing Day. He died alone in a homeless shelter in Vancouver of an overdose. And so that's why, it's continually happening. That's I'm also happy to announce that we're very, very, very close to moving forward. We have all the charitable stuff in place, and a beautiful group of people, from professionals and retired like staff sergeants of the OPP up here in Ontario, like cops on the board, people that can really like back and say, okay, well, like if I got police officers standing beside me, one of the top cops in essentially all of Canada, and supporting this cause and doing it, like we just have, I'm just really grateful. So I just wanted to take a moment. People, what you've seen through Puck Support has just been this clothing line, because I didn't know what else to do. It was like, I need to keep the message going. I need to keep their memory alive, but now it's time to really do something about it. And that means, raising money and finding the right people and the right programs in the right way, which I'm not really sure what that is. And it will always evolve, but right. Working with people like yourselves and organizations and everything. It's not about Puck Support. It's not about me. It's about the greater good. Like I always say, I'll come in and do something. Puck Support will come in and do something. We don't need to be on the card, the fight card, if you will, or whatever, any advertising. But if I can, or the organization can be a part of something that can help people, just tell us when to be there. That's the way it should be. Right. So, that's what Puck Support is, pucksupport.com. at Puck Support, but you're going to be seeing a lot of changes with Puck Support here in the near future, which is awesome. It's been a long road. I've been grinding for 2 years, man, but I had to, and I'm so glad I did. I'm just and shout out to Dave Gilmore and the Gilmore family for helping me out, because without them, I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you this, man. We'll talk about it off the air, but we're going to support you too. All right, that's number one, and number two, man. For those of you listening, can't see Brady right now, the passion is exploding out there. All right. And I mean it because, listen, we talk about purpose, right? That's what it looks like.
He's more motivated than you, Lee.
Oh, yeah. Why'd you have to go there with it, man? That's
okay. Just saying, Lee.
He's challenging me. No, it's inspiring. You know what? You are, Brady, and it's inspiring. All right. It's inspiring. I can see that, JB. You're right. All right. But that's one of the things that pushes me to do this. People like you, man. So,
listen, you inspire me, the way that you speak and the way that your brain computes things and the way that you're able to speak. And like you said, breaking it down, like in relation to cancer versus overdose. And just like, man, what you do is incredible. What you guys both are doing here is so important. I really honestly just value this time. Thank you for allowing me to come on and share this space, because if there's one thing that I've noticed, I'll be 35 next month, and time is the most precious thing we have. So thank you for allowing me to share this hour, and to the listeners, to the viewers, thank you. Thank you for being here, man. Like, this story is just beginning, and for those of you listening, again, you want more information on Brady, check out pucksupport.com. And you can look up his name. There'll be plenty of things that pop up, stories, newspaper articles. Go down that rabbit hole. I hope you guys got time.
Yeah, it's good stuff if you read about it. So, that's going to do it for this episode of Win Championship Trades for Life. Again, we're powered by Pivotal Moments Media. Check out our channel Grit over on that website. We've got a lot of interviews, inspirational, entertaining content for Brady Leavold and JB Spizzo. I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Keep an eye out for more episodes soon, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to this edition of Win Championship Traits for Life. If you like what you heard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button or that like button wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, pivotalmomentsmedia.com. And remember, Win is part of Grit, a Pivotal Moments Media channel, which is working to break the stigma surrounding mental fitness in sports. Again, visit pivotalmomentsmedia.com for more episodes, content, and education on how we can tackle that challenge together. Keep climbing, and we'll see you on the next